In this video, I'm going to show you how to use custom GPTs that are made by individuals and then published on the ChatGPT store. So for this one, I went and found one that was going to help me with Matplotlib, which is a thing we can do in Python. I'm going to walk you through that. I'm going to show you how that works specifically with a couple of different examples. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to activate the voice here, and I'm going to say, help me make a line chart that shows a trend of sales figures by division split up against 4 divisions. You can do north, south, east, west division. And then I want you to show me the trend line for 2023 month by month. I want you to make the whole chart into a dark theme. And then I want the fonts to be white and I want them to be fairly big. Go ahead and generate that for me and give me all the code. So I didn't necessarily need to provide that level of detail because what this is going to do, because it focuses just on Matplotlib, that aspect of Python, is that it's going to go ahead and make me a visual of the actual chart. It's going to write all the code, and then it should be going through and doing everything here, you know, specific to just that language. So instead of just like using regular GPT would take a prompt for you to deviate into this specific task, but this specific GPT is written just to focus on Matplotlib. So that's the thing that's unique here that we're actually getting out of all this. So, okay, here you go. You can see here's the type of chart that we got. Sales in units, this sort of legend here, this trend month over month. And then right down here, we have this whole breakdown of all the code, right? So this is where we can get the code, modify it to our own means, and do all that. And then from here, we can take this code, go ahead, do what we want with it, or we can continue on to work with this data more in depth. Okay, for this next bit, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, for each of the sales divisions, make me a scatter plot of the top 10 salespeople in each division. And then I want you to label each of the points on the scatter plot for those individual salespeople's contributions to the overall division's sales numbers. And I want the numbers to be represented in dollars, total dollars that those salespeople actually sold. Cool, so this should go through, identify that, and then make me some code from that. And what I can do is I can take any of this output here, put this inside of a notebook, modify this. Obviously, if we're talking about, you know, working with pandas, we could get all of this data from, you know, a data frame, you know, or from some sort of, you know, API that we're pulling the data in from. And I'm just using sales data as the example here. It's not necessarily, you know, you could do this for any example, but what I'm showing you here is that you could use a GPT like this for this specific instance to focus on very candidly getting just one type of GPT to do a very specific task for you like this. All right, cool. All right, so we have different scatter plots, and what it did is it actually broke up north, south, east, and west by the different sales numbers, and it did salesperson, you know, it just had like a salesperson and a number. And so what I'm going to do for this demo, just to kind of build this up, is I'm going to say like what I want it to do in terms of remixing this. So I'm going to say, go ahead and redo this scatter plot. I want, instead of X's, I want you to use circles. And then instead of salespersons 1 through 20, or however you have that, I want you to generate random human names for actual salespeople. And then what I want you to do is just take the top 5 in all of the divisions and then combine them. And then for the circles that you actually display on the points of the scatter chart, I want those to be colors that represent the individual divisions. So, for example, if North is blue and 2 salespeople from the North division are in the top 5 salespeople, then their 2 points would be blue. All right, cool. So let's see what that does. We did get all the code. Obviously, we can take a look at this. This does have some comments. We can do things like we can ask for the comments to be more robust or better in, whatever way we want them to be. We can say, hey, like, let's get this to, have more comments. We can even say, hey, like, make comments in different languages, depending on, if you need to send this to somebody or you're making this for like a course or something like that. Could be whatever it is. Okay, cool. So I had an error analyzing. So I'm just going to go ahead and try to fire that again. It's working again. If things like this happen, just go ahead and redo the prompt. Okay, cool. So we have the output. We have the top 5 salespeople across divisions. The way that it split this up, I'm not really sure that I like it all that much. But what we can always do is we can pass another prompt. It got closer to what I wanted. What it's kind of doing with this one is focusing on, I think, the top 4 or 5 in the division. So it's close, but it's not quite. So what I would do if I wanted to clear this up is I would just, give it another prompt for clarity, see if it works that out. And then eventually visually, when I get the type of chart that I want, I can obviously just leave with that code, right? Which you get all that code here, and then you can just take that. Obviously, you're going to have to feed your own data and all that, but you can start to get exactly what you want in here. Okay, so another thing we can do with Matplotlib is a histogram. And so I'm going to give it a prompt. I'm going to say, make me a histogram for the highest average sales price across the divisions. So assume that in this mock data, all of these divisions and all of these salespeople sell cars, and I want you to provide a histogram of which division had the highest average car sales price per car sold. So basically, I want you to take a histogram, and then I want you to make it tell me which division is selling the most expensive cars per transaction on average. So we're going to see if this comes out exactly how we want. I'm actually not quite sure how this is going to look, but if it doesn't look the way we want, what we can do is just describe vocally using this. We got this microphone here. This thing is really handy. That will help us deconflict what might be the issue, right? So definitely just like we're gonna lean into that. Okay, cool. So let's look at this. So we have a histogram, right? We have a north. They're doing the mean. Okay, great. So we have these, and they're kind of ranked lowest to highest. And I'd like it to be the other way around. And then when I look at this, okay, that's kind of cool. And you can see where we have some crossover. I think I'd like the colors to be different. And then I think I might like there to be some sort of label on the histogram inside of there. But I'm just going to describe all that. So I'm going to say, can you make it so that in the legend, the highest average is at the top of the list, and then that list sorts in a descending fashion to the lowest average division output of average car sales price per transaction. And then if you can, inside of the histogram, let's use 4 different colors that are bolder and provide a clearer representation. And can you put a little label somewhere where, like, so if Division West is selling the highest per average transaction, let's go ahead and use that. And we will put a little West label on the actual histogram. So I want to see if it can do that. I want to see if it can get creative to do that. I think this one is pretty good. And, we have the code for this, so we could go in and we could mess with this ourselves. However, it would be good to go ahead and see what it outputs. Okay, cool. So this is basically exactly what I described. So it has highest to lowest, and then exactly how I described the West division, that's the highest. And you can see where it just put a little label straight to West. So you can see that they're in the lead and that they're doing the highest average car sales price. So overall, really good. I'm going to give it a sort of nuanced command. I'm going to say, cool, can you take the background of this histogram and make it like a dark gray, but not a black? And then can you make the title in the top of the chart, can you make the font about twice the size? And then at the bottom where you have on the x-axis all of the prices, or can you put those in a dollar amount across the x-axis? And then make the font there a little bit bigger. Cool, so we'll see if it does that. That would be really cool. And at this point in time, we're just iterating on the style that we have right here. And we'll see how it comes out. So this didn't come out exactly how I wanted. So I'm going to say I want the entire background to be a dark gray, not a light gray. I don't want any black in the background. And then on the x-axis, you somehow shifted everything to the left. And I want it to be evenly represented across the entire x-axis. I don't want there to be a giant gap on the right-hand side. You can still stick with everything else. Everything else looks good. Just keep that and change everything else I mentioned. So you can see I'm being very vague and general, but I'm expressing my distaste for the like the black and gray contrast. Like, no, I want it all to be a dark gray, not a light gray. So now I think it should be taking that English and then transforming that into what should be, actionable Python, right? So if we look here, it's just using dark gray, and like dark gray comes out to like almost that. So I'm thinking what it'll probably do is go, instead of using the actual using dark gray, it'll probably go look for an actual hex that's actually darker than what it considers dark gray. We'll see what it does. And it still kept the same thing, but what it did do is it did sort out the axis here so that is even. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, because let's just say that I don't want to touch the code, I'm going to say I want the background to be a darker color of gray, and I want the outside of the chart to not be black, but to be the same color of gray as the background of the histogram. And so you'll see the output that we got now is that it's white. So we're just going to need to work with it, even though we did get the initial background to be gray. I think what it interpreted me saying is that I wanted everything outside the chart to not be even visible at all, which was not correct. But with that being said, we could iterate on this, fix that. I can even look right here and I can see that it did go for a hex code, kind of like what I said, with the darker gray. And we could even fix this manually inside this code, whatever we want to do, but I think we'll move on at this point. Okay, I'm going to say, go ahead and make me a bar plot of the same data, and I just want to see how you represent it, and then go ahead and keep the same color, but I do not want any white represented anywhere that is not a font. So don't use this white background. Cool. So I'll see if it remedies the color change, and if it starts to align with me that it, the dark gray, is valuable, and if it starts to keep that. We'll see, what we can do here. and we'll see what he outputs. Okay, so we have this, but it is keeping the color scheme from the last prompt. So I just put in here, make the background outside the edges darker gray and not this white. And what I'm going to do is, if this persists, is I'm just going to go in the code right here and actually find what it's fixating on with this white, and then we're going to get rid of that entirely. And it looks like it fixed it entirely, and it's sticking with that darker gray. The only problem is that in the legend, it's erased the legend. So, we do have to work with this a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and address that. Everything looks good. All of the colors are awesome, except in the legend, I can't read it because everything is white. So make sure that that font contrasts inside of your legend box there. Cool, that fixed it perfectly. At this point, the next thing I'm going to do is try to see if I can measure the gap between the division sales and see where the discrepancies are. So I'm just going to describe that as a data problem to the assistant, to the GPT, and let it help me. So I'm going to say that I want to know the difference between all of the division sales, and I think I want to use a box plot for this. I want to know the difference between East and West sales, East and South sales, and South and North sales. And I want to see all of the differences. And I'm thinking that that visualization will help me. But ultimately, what I want to know is the differences in volume or average sales price that each division has between them. And I want a chart for that. Cool. So we'll see if it takes that description, which I know I was kind of all over the place how I was describing that, but basically we want to measure, what's the delta between these, and these. And then hopefully we're gonna see that. And it even covers that. It says, since the specifics of the data, volume or average sales price, because I kind of said both. And then I sort of changed my mind. It was like, oh, well, since you didn't really describe exactly what you want, I'm just going to keep using the same metric that we've been working with, which is perfect. And I tried to reiterate that when I was speaking, but it kind of picked up the slack because it hasn't worked with a volume. We've mainly been focusing on that sales price the whole way out. So, okay, cool. So now we have this box plot. And what I'm going to say is, just openly, I can't read this visualization because almost everything is white and there are no visual letters on it at all, and there's no legend or anything like that. There's no X or Y axis that I could tell. So I need you to fix the colors, and I want you to use the dark theme gray that we have been using in the past visualizations as a guide. Cool. So we'll see how that comes out. So after a couple of prompts that I had spared recording, I was able to get some of a breakdown of what I was looking for. So we have an East versus West, East versus South, and South versus North comparison. And that lined up with pretty much what I was looking for. And so I had the breakdown here of the top, the middle, and then kind of the difference here in a breakdown. I do not think that this is probably the perfect plot that we could have used. I think maybe there would have been a different type of chart that we could have used. And I'm just going to ask it. I'm going to say, do you think there is a different type of plot or chart that we could gain this answer from better than this one? If there is one, just go ahead and show me an example and I'll let you know if that works. So we'll see what it outputs. I'm basically just not being specific to what I want. I just kind of want it to give me another chart suggestion. Okay, so what it gave me was just a paired bar chart, and it has this comparison right here, and it's basically just putting two charts side by side. And I'm just going to say, can you give me that same thing in horizontal? And so we'll see if it gives me the horizontal style and just see what that looks like overall. Not that bad. I could even probably just ask it for just one of these comparisons, or I could say, hey, I want each comparison to be in a separate chart, and then that would give me a breakout to where I can make graphics of the individual breakouts by themselves, individual comparisons between divisions by themselves. Cool, yeah, so it gave me everything in horizontal breakdown, and then I could do what we were talking about. I could say, hey, can you give me each division comparison in its own separate chart? I like the horizontal nature. I just want you to make the x-axis with bigger font, and I want you to put a $sign next to those, and then maybe in general just make all of the fonts bigger so that they are more readable. So we'll see how that comes out. Okay, so it did this thing where it goes to white again. Obviously we know the remedy for that is just to talk to it and say, hey, all of your X and Y axis isn't readable on any of these charts because the background is all white, and I would like you to keep that darker gray color that you have been using as the color all around. So we know how to fix that. I mean, honestly, at this point in time, we'll wait and see what that looks like, but we'll just move on to another problem. Cool, that fixed it basically instantly. It didn't put the $signs over in here, but it just kind of has them. That's fine. Not super worried about that. So now can you go ahead and make me a stacked area chart of all of the division sales throughout the year, and I want you to give each division their own color. You can use the same colors that you have been, and I would like you to keep the darker gray styling for this stacked area chart. Cool, so we'll see what this does. I'd like to see it keep some of the themes that we had before, where we were working with the histogram, where it showed the West Division in the lead, and we put a very clear label to show that it was you know, the dominant monetary figure, and we only labeled that. There was no point in labeling the other ones because we just want to kind of visualize who the leader was in that situation. Okay, so I did have to create a correction here, and it looks like this one went a little bit crazy, so we're going to go ahead and do another correction here. Just visually describe that the labels are a little bit too crazy, so I'm going to say, if you can go ahead and clean up the labels, that would be good. Everything else looks great, but for some reason you have like tons of labels that extend upwards outside of the area chart. So let's fix that. So I'm just going to kind of see if it can look back at what it did and if it can address that and just sort of understand that it needs to, it needs to address that. Okay, cool. So now we have this, but there's kind of a lot of labels. So I'm going to try to see if the division labels can be removed. It says try to avoid clutter, but we're going to need it to declutter some more. So go ahead and change those labels so that we don't have so many. Let's just put one big label in the center of wherever it fits the easiest. Or let's just put it at the farthest right side of the x-axis or something like that. So we'll see what it does with that. And that would just be a refinement there for this. Okay, cool. So it understood exactly what I was saying, went straight to it, put all the labels at the farthest right-hand side of the x-axis. Cool. Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately this is pretty good. We could ask it to add a couple different things. We could probably put some labels along here for the different, highlights. And I could say like, hey, if there was like a peak in sales on any given month, and let me try that. If there was a peak in sales on any given month of the year that was their highest or top performing month, can you just put one label on the peak of that point in the data that shows like the highest month that any given division had? And we'll just see if that does what we think we're describing. And almost all of this is designing your prompt and forming it and describing the problem. And you can even be redundant when you describe the problem. you can over and over again describe what you're saying, and I think eventually all of that text will translate to the machine, usually in a really productive way. Okay, cool. So it almost did it, except for it put the peak, and I see what you did where you put the peak as the label, but what I want you to do, instead of saying west peak, east peak, south peak, north peak, I want you to put the actual financial value of that peak and what that highest month did in sales. Okay, so it did it and it put the dollar amount there, but it wasn't quite like what I thought. And then what's interesting is that it put like something like, 4,795, but then in reality, like, okay, well, why up here where it has a sales number of, 14,000, 12,000, do I still have like a $4,000 number here? So I would address that with it and then get it to clean it up. But we got the placement right in our description. And then just for fun, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, go ahead and make me 5 random charts or plots from Matplotlib's library of different options, and I want you to take all the examples that we talked about, and then I want you to give me like 5 different versions of the best and most insightful data visualizations that you could possibly give me. And I want you to style it all in dark theme the way we have been every time I've said that the charts were good. And I want you to just give me a bunch of different really cool options, and maybe options that we haven't discussed here so far. Cool. And what I'm kind of looking for is for it to kind of just randomly give me options that I maybe haven't considered in this. And then I want that code, because this is all about learning, what the different options are, or, how we could visualize that sales data and what we could really do with it. So we'll wait and see what it gives us. Cool. And this gave us a couple ones that we didn't talk about. We had a heat map of all the divisions and all the months and their volume. And so we can see that South was doing better in the spring, but North was doing better in the summer. And, West was really killing it before anybody else, so we got a pie chart. Great. That's got a percentage, seeing that, if we look at it this way, it kind of looks like they're all pretty much doing the same thing percentage wise. And then this distribution chart, this is kind of neat. Just sort of a cool visual right here. Now, total sales is just sort of a blunt force type of thing, just represents, total number. And then once again, we got a time series. We kind of went over that already. But overall, I think that this is an example of what a really cool custom GPT could do for you, because you could probably feed your own data in here, upload a file, do whatever you want, and then it could go ahead and analyze all that for you. And definitely shout out to the creator, James Donovan, for making this. This is just a really good example of what one of these custom GPTs could do for a topic like this that could actually help you out quite a bit. If this was helpful to you, please like and subscribe, share this video, and drop a comment if you have any questions or you have suggestions for other types of videos along these lines that you would like to see. Thanks for watching.